Okay, yes, here's my Disney Infinity 3.0 video. 3.0 launched across various platforms from August 2015 to October 2015. These were for current and previous gen consoles at the time, as well as iOS, Android, PC, and Apple TV, apparently. Now, this was primarily developed again by Avalanche Studios, but they did have help from various other studios to work on playsets and new combat mechanics. Heavy Iron Studios also developed the iOS and Android versions. Now, I'm sorry it's taken me so long to get to 3.0, so just as a reminder, as it's been so long, this is how the video will work. We'll look at the playsets that were released for 3.0, and then we'll look at some additional content from the game. Well then, let's get into it. So obviously 3.0's big gimmick was the inclusion of Star Wars, and by God does it do it very well. We'll go through the 3 Star Wars playsets in chronological order, and thankfully, the first of these was included in the starter set. Welcome to Twilight of the Republic. This playset is based on the Star Wars The Clone Wars animated series, and as well, of course, the prequel trilogy. This playset launched as the starter pack and featured Anakin and Ahsoka, and then you could purchase Obi-Wan, Darth Maul, and Yoda separately. Now, a feature that was introduced in 2.0 was collecting little character tokens within each playset that allowed you to play as other characters from outside of that playset, and that continues here, so there's other Star Wars characters that you can unlock to play as in this playset. So the Twilight of the Republic playset sees you traversing across the galaxy to stop Darth Maul and the Separatists. Along the way, you'll fight various different enemies, including General Grievous, which is pretty cool, and you'll go to 4 different planets, including Geonosis, Tatooine, Coruscant, and Naboo. I'm really sorry if I butchered any of those planet pronunciations. Now, as this is Star Wars, there was obviously going to be a heavy focus on combat, and the combat in 2.0 was just meh, so it's nice to see they've done some work on it here. So Disney actually brought in the developer called Ninja Theory, who'd worked on the Devil May Cry series, and they had to create the playset as well as smoothing out the overall game's combat mechanics. And they've done a pretty good job too, because combat does feel a lot smoother than it ever has in Disney Infinity before. Especially as you level each of your characters up, you get a lot more combat options and a lot of fluidity with the lightsaber. Now, this playset has plenty for you to do, with various combat challenges, platforming challenges, fairly simple puzzles, and a lot more for you to sink your teeth into. The other 2 Star Wars sets have a bit more of an emphasis on ship combat, but this one primarily is on the ground with a little bit of pod racing sprinkled in. The boss fights are pretty cool, the General Grievous fight is good, the Darth Maul fight is pretty much exactly as it was in The Phantom Menace, which was perfect, so no complaints here. The figures themselves all look really good, and visually inside the game, everything looks nice as well. It's very Star Wars, it's very believable. Disney Infinity has always looked nice, and that's still the case here. Now, if you're just doing the story and none of the side content, then you can pretty much finish Twilight of the Republic in about 2 hours, probably just over 2 hours. And you know, Disney Infinity wasn't cheap either, so is it worth it? And the answer is of course yes, because you can use these figures in the Toybox, the Speedway, everything else. It's really good. And for reference, the version of the game that you're seeing here is the Gold Edition on Steam, and I know there's missing content, but there are mods to put them back in. Now, just some fun facts about the Twilight of the Republic playset, because it's the only Star Wars playset of the 3 to have an original story, as well as the only one to open with characters already on a planet, because the other 2, and mild spoiler warning here, start with you flying ships. And it's also the only playset out of the 3 to have original characters created specifically for the game. Now, before we move on to the next playset, if you're a fan of Disney Infinity or Disney tie-in games, then this channel will be perfect for you, so why not hit that subscribe button and tap the bell for notifications of my future uploads. And let's move on to the next Star Wars playset. So next up we have Star Wars Rise Against the Empire, which is of course set in the original trilogy. So this playset came with Luke Skywalker and Princess Leia included, and then additional characters from this era of Star Wars you could buy were Han Solo, Chewbacca, Darth Vader, and Boba Fett. Much like Twilight of the Republic, there were also character tokens you could pick up throughout the levels, which would allow you to play as other Star Wars characters from different eras. So this is basically a retelling of the original trilogy, just with some creative liberties and a few parts cut out. So one of the main differences from the films is that in the playset, all 4 of the main characters, Luke, Leia, Han and Chewie, have all been acquainted prior to the playset starting, and they're all present with each other throughout the playset story, so obviously many scenes from the film have been changed or removed. As well as this, Luke, Leia and Han have their outfits from A New Hope throughout the entire playset. Another major change later on is that Luke's duel with Darth Vader, and the revelation that he is his father, is moved to the escape from Hoth rather than on Cloud City, and because this is obviously a kid's game, Luke does not lose his hand. So in terms of gameplay, it's pretty much identical to Twilight of the Republic in terms of combat and platforming, except this time there's a bit more spaceship combat as well. Your story will take you across 3 different planets, and these are Tatooine, Hoth and the forest moon of Endor, as well as going to the Death Star and Jabba's palace. This particular playset was developed by Studio Gobo, who were behind the Pirates of the Caribbean playset from the original game. They were actually originally supposed to develop the Twilight of the Republic playset, but when they realised that Gobo were better with vehicles and Ninja Theory were better with combat, they swapped them around. And it worked out alright. The vehicle controls on land are fine, they can be a bit janky at times, but overall are pretty good. Now again, all the planets here have been rendered really nicely, the game looks really good, and the characters and figures all look really nice as well. I'm a big fan of Boba Fett's figure, and fun fact about him, the figure was exclusive to a Star Wars Saga bundle for the PS3 and PS4 at launch, and was not made available as a separate figure until March 2016, so about 6 months after launch, when you could buy it separately. Anyway, this is another banging playset. It's definitely not my favourite across Disney Infinity 3.0, because that goes to the first of these 3 Star Wars sets, purely based on my bias for the prequels. Anyway, let's move on to our final of the 3 Star Wars playsets. So next up we have probably the weakest of the 3 Star Wars playsets, and that is the Force Awakens playset. And no, that's not just me being biased against the sequels. Obviously Disney wanted to capitalise on its upcoming movie, The Force Awakens, so there was this and the LEGO tie-in. It annoys me just a teeny tiny bit that these exist, however, because the other 2 playsets, as well as previous LEGO games, were based off of various Star Wars properties, not just one single film. Anyway, small rant over, welcome to the Force Awakens playset. The set was bundled with Rey and Finn, but you could also buy Poe Dameron and Kylo Ren separately. This playset was not available at the launch of the game, and actually released a couple of months later on December 18th, 2015, which was the same day as the film. The playset follows the basic plot of The Force Awakens, but again cuts out and changes a few things. So that means certain characters got removed entirely, such as Captain Phasma, General Hux, Supreme Leader Snoke, and even Luke Skywalker are not in this playset at all, as well as Rey's side of the story is not in the game whatsoever, and the opening section of the film is completely removed, with the playset beginning with Finn and Poe escaping the First Order in a TIE fighter. So the game will take you across a couple of different planets and locations, starting on Jakku, Takodana, and eventually Kylo Ren's Starkiller base. I think that's what it's called, don't come for me. Anyway, it's just more of the same here, but just not as exciting. The first half an hour or so of the game is just a massive grind to collect scrap to leave Jakku in the first place, and the rest is pretty much just a carbon copy of what we'd already seen in the original trilogy playset. Something that is very cool though is that the 4 actors from The Force Awakens do reprise their roles in this game, so that's Adam Driver as Kylo Ren, Oscar Isaac as Poe Dameron, John Boyega as Finn, and Daisy Ridley as Rey, which I have to say is very, very cool. It's a shame that they couldn't get the other actors from the original trilogy, but they were never going to get Harrison Ford to do any Han Solo voice work in these games. Anyway, speaking of Han Solo, I do think it's a shame that, although you can play as Han Solo after you get his character token in this game, it's the young version from the original trilogy. I think it would be cooler if you put the figure on and you got old Han Solo, because at the end of the day, that's what he is in this game and was in the film. So the playset has combat, platforming, vehicle mechanics, pretty much everything we've already seen, and it all still works really nicely here. It's just reused from previous playsets. If you're a fan of The Force Awakens, you'll be a fan of this playset, because it's just The Force Awakens again, with some new dialogue from the original cast. Now, much like they missed out on Luke losing his hand in the original trilogy, Han Solo getting killed does not happen in this game. It's implied, but we never actually see anything happen. Anyway, so this is still a pretty decent playset. It's just a shame this isn't based off of a trilogy or a series. It's just one film, and that reflects in the time you can take to complete it, because you can beat this playset in less than 2 hours. Not as much variety, the lineup of characters is obviously smaller because it's just one film. Overall, still fine, just not great. Okay, so next up we have the first of 2 non-Star Wars playsets that were available for Disney Infinity 3.0, and they are both Pixar playsets, so this is the Inside Out playset. The set was available at launch to provide fans who didn't want to just play Star Wars something else to play, and the playset pack featured joy and anger, and then you could purchase sadness, disgust, and fear separately. This playset is set after the events of the first film, with Riley, the human that the emotions live inside, has fallen asleep on the couch and she accidentally turns on a scary movie. This sends her subconsciousness into chaos, and the emotions have to set out to fix everything again. So this game obviously does not have a heavy emphasis on combat like the Star Wars levels do. There is a much bigger focus on platforming and puzzles, and it feels really good to control. There's a mix of 3D and 2.5D platforming, and the game has 29 different levels for you to play through. All 5 different emotions have different special abilities, so joy can glide, anger can run across the lava, fear can run fast, making disappearing platforms easier, sadness can stand on the disappearing platforms without them disappearing, and disgust can jump high off of those disappearing platforms. Now, you don't need to have all 5 of these characters to complete the game, they just make it a lot easier. Now, the bulk of your time in this game will be spent collecting balloons. The more balloons you get, the better score you get. There are hundreds darted throughout every level, and for 100% completion you will need to get every single balloon. There are also other collectibles such as idea bulbs and mind manual pages. And this is one of those playsets where yes, you can play it in single player, but it's much better to play this one in co-op. It's a lot more fun with someone else. And interestingly enough, the Inside Out playset is the only playset to have more playable female characters than playable male characters. Anyway, so yeah, this is a pretty good time. It's very colourful, it looks great, it captures the vibes of the film very well. Not every voice actor comes back to voice their emotions, but the voice cast here still do a very good job. Overall, the Inside Out playset is very reminiscent of 3D collectathon platformers, and I'm a huge fan of that genre, so the Inside Out playset is a win for me. Anyway, this is a very well made and competent to play playset, but I don't really have much else to say about it, so let's move on to our 5th and final playset of Disney Infinity 3.0. So the 5th and final playset for Disney Infinity 3.0, as well as being the final ever playset released for Disney Infinity, is Finding Dory. The playset came with just one character, and that is Dory, and then you could purchase Nemo separately, which to be honest just screamed hungry for money at the end of Disney Infinity's lifespan, because they very easily could have just put Nemo in the playset pack, because every other playset typically came with 2 figures. Anyway, enough of that rant. What is the Finding Dory playset about? Well, it follows the plot of the film, and actually features a 2D side-scrolling gameplay style, which I guess kinda makes sense for this kind of game because we've got Echo the Dolphin, right? However, I do think this would have been cool as a 3D experience rather than a side-scroller. So the gameplay consists of you pretty much guiding lost fish to freedom and shooting bubbles to eliminate enemies. And then you can also build a custom reef. Now, much like other playsets, unfortunately not the full voice cast come back to voice their characters here, but Hayden Rowlands, who voiced Nemo in Finding Dory, is here, and Ed O'Neill, who you may know from Modern Family, is still the voice of Hank the Octopus as well. All the other voice actors still do a decent job at replicating their voices. Now, unfortunately, I was not able to get the mods for this working to get it back into the PC version of Disney Infinity, so unfortunately this is the only playset across all 3 of these videos that I haven't been able to play. However, from what I can see is that this game captures the world of Finding Nemo and Dory very well, it's very pretty, and it has that quality that we've come to expect from Disney Infinity playsets. Now that does take us to the end of our Disney Infinity 3.0 playsets, but there are a couple of other things I'd like to talk about from this game. So let's start off with the final Toybox game for Disney Infinity, and that is Marvel Battlegrounds. So Marvel Battlegrounds was a Toybox game expansion for Disney Infinity 3.0. Now obviously there were no Marvel playsets included in 3.0 because 2.0 was entirely Marvel themed. So the Battlegrounds Toybox set was the first set to be sold with just one figure, obviously being followed by Finding Dory, and that figure was an MCU themed Captain America, which is not the same as the Captain America figure that came with 2.0. Now, with the release of Battlegrounds, we also got a few new Marvel characters that you could purchase separately, and those were Ant-Man, Black Panther, Black Suit Spider-Man, the Hulkbuster Iron Man suit, Ultron, and Vision. So the Battlegrounds story sees Ultron teaming up with Loki to steal the Infinity Stones stored on Asgard. Ultron and Loki create robotic replicas of the different Marvel characters and turn them against each other to distract them whilst they steal the stone. Eventually this will lead you to a fight with Ultron. So as well as having these new 3.0 Marvel characters, Battlegrounds was compatible with every single Marvel character released in 2.0 as well, so there's plenty of different options to choose from. The choice of new 3.0 Marvel characters does make sense. They've clearly been made to capitalize on the Marvel movies coming out at the time, such as Age of Ultron, Ant-Man, and the upcoming at the time, Captain America Civil War. All these new figures are very nice, but the absolute standout has to be the Hulkbuster Iron Man suit. Oh my god, it's such a cool figure. So, interestingly enough, whilst this was the first set to only include one figure, it was also the first set to introduce 4-player co-op. So that's just wonderful, thanks a bunch Disney. But anyway, in terms of gameplay, this is an action brawler kind of game. There's nothing too exciting going on here, but the concept itself is the cool thing about it. In fact, had Disney Infinity not been shut down, I'm sure Marvel Battlegrounds could have been expanded upon greatly to include new and upcoming characters from the MCU releasing alongside, which would have been something very cool to see. Anyway, Battlegrounds was the only Toybox game developed for 3.0 and would be the last Toybox game developed for Disney Infinity across the board. It's a pretty decent time, but it's certainly a lot more fun if you have people to play it with. So the final feature of 3.0 I want to talk about today is the Toybox Speedway. This was a kart racing addition to 3.0, and the developers actually brought in Sumo Digital, the legends behind many different racing games, some of which we've actually looked at on the channel, to work on this mode. So Toybox Speedway had various different races and Grand Prix that you could partake in, with different engine sizes and difficulty. There were tracks from Wreck-It Ralph, Frozen, Big Hero 6, there was a lot of cool stuff going on here, and I have to give a lot of credit to Sumo Digital because you can see that their work on the Sonic and All-Stars Racing series and such other games has come into effect here. Don't get me wrong, there's still some slightly wonky physics from the main Disney Infinity engine anyway, but for the most part, it's a very fun addition to the game. Every character across all 3 Disney Infinities could be used here, and also, every single power disc that had a vehicle on could also be put into this to race with. Obviously, the bulk of the characters here had to sit in their own cars, but you also had the Cars franchise figures as well, such as Lightning, Mater, and Francesco. So overall, Disney Infinity 3.0 was definitely a big step up from its predecessor. Unfortunately though, it was just too little too late, because by the time this game had come out, the Toys to Life craze had started to die down, and so many other companies were doing the same thing that it was impossible to keep up with how much money you'd have to spend to play them all. Skylanders, LEGO Dimensions, and then Nintendo were doing their own thing with Amiibo as well. I think what didn't help with Disney Infinity and the Toys to Life genre as a whole was making these games yearly releases. By making them yearly releases, fatigue just set in too quickly, and also just made these games feel too similar to each other. Yes, Star Wars was a step in the right direction, but I don't know where Disney could have gone with this after 3.0, other than back to their own IPs. I mean, who knows, maybe one day we'll see a return to the Toys to Life genre, but I don't see that happening anytime soon. Anyway, so what was the response to 3.0 like? Well, across its various home console releases, the game would go on to sell about 3 million copies, and this is as per VG charts, which is pretty respectable. Bear in mind these figures aren't just for the starter packs, not for additional characters or playsets sold separately. Now in terms of critical response, this was by far the best reviewed of the 3, with all versions of the game scoring about 80 out of 100 on Metacritic, whereas 2.0 had about a 70 to 74, and again the same with the original, about a 75%. Now for me, I really enjoyed my time with 3.0 and I probably will return to it at some point to finish up all the stuff I missed, as well as getting the Finding Dory set working and seeing what other mods are out there for this game. I do think it's a shame that this series did have to come to an end, but on the other hand it did also save me a lot of money. So what are your thoughts on Disney Infinity 3.0 and the series as a whole? Just let me know in the comments down below. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like, and if you haven't done so already, subscribe and tap that bell for notifications of my future uploads. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Bye bye.